Welcome to the Fight with Depression podcast, the podcast for people who want to improve their mental health. My name is Christopher Boussard, and once again, I have Molly with me.
Hello.
Hi. You almost sounded like you were waiting for a response. The episode today, we're going to be talking about communication, which is kind of funny because I'm stumbling over my own words already. But we're going to be discussing communication.
Yeah, I think we've kind of touched on this in previous episodes, but I don't know about you, Christopher, but I really believe that it was important for us to kind of circle back and take a little bit of a deeper dive into it, because not only is communication a huge part of, everybody's life, but successful communication can sometimes be really, really difficult. And I think that as a couple, we have navigated that, both the really good and the really bad ways of communicating. And I think I don't know, I'm excited to talk about it more because, yeah,
You're excited to communicate?
I am excited to communicate.
So I think it might be appropriate to open up with this quote from George Bernard Shaw. He says, "The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place." So I think sometimes I know we've experienced this, Molly and I have, where, one of us thinks that, well, I've made my point clear, or I've said my part, or I've communicated efficiently, and the other one does not agree.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of I think communication, we can talk about many different aspects of it as far as relationally in a marriage or in a partnership. You can talk it with your children at work, whatever it is. But when you go back and, you think about all these things when people are married, and women have kind of like, oh, I have this expectation that I want out of my husband, but he should just know what I want. And no offense to men or anything, or to guys or to Christopher, but a lot of the times they have no clue what we really need or what we really want. And it's kind of an unfair expectation for us to be like, well, you should know what I want, or you should know what I need, when maybe you haven't verbalized and communicated that. I don't know. I just think that's one of the things that kind of drives me nuts. And I'm very guilty of that early on in our relationship or in our marriage, just kind of thinking that Christopher should know the things that, oh, you should know how I'm feeling. You should know what I need or what I want. And I haven't really communicated that. And then maybe me not being as kind as I should have been when I didn't get the things that I wanted because he didn't know.
Well, but part of that too is, even if you ask, sometimes it's not brought out where, be like, okay, well, what do you need? What is something you need? Tell me, explain to me what's going on, or anything, something like that. And it just doesn't get communicated, where, as you would say, well, what's going on? What's wrong with you? What's going on with you? Why, and I'm like, nothing, I'm fine. We talked about that. I know we talked about that in previous episodes and everything. It's like, no, I'm fine. I don't want to talk about it. And the assumption there is, well, that if there's something, if your significant other, if your husband, if your wife or whatever is upset or whatever it is, that the problem's with you, well, it might be something else. And we've talked about that with, the first responders and everything, where, I come home from work and exhausted or whatever it is, and I'm quiet. And the assumption that Molly has is that I'm upset with her. She's like, "Are you bothered? Did I do something wrong?" No, you didn't. Well, if I don't tell her what's bothering me. She's going to think, well, he says that there's, it's not me, but it must be me. And that brings me to this other quote from
I like that.
Henry Winkler. He says assumptions are the termites of relationships, which, I
Yes.
mean, it really does. It tears them down if you are assuming that there's one problem when it's something else. Because what Molly and I would do is she would assume that I'm upset with her. There was something else, but I didn't communicate to her what my problem was, even if I'm just saying, no, I'm frustrated because somebody looked at me weird on my way home, or whatever it was. I didn't communicate that, and so she would assume that I'm frustrated with her, even though we hadn't seen each other in 48 hours. That I must be frustrated with her, and then she would reciprocate by treating me like, you know how dare I be upset with her for something that I'm not telling her. And it would just kind of go back and forth, and all because the assumption that, well, there's something that's going on, but he's not communicating, or she's not communicating, or whatever. And it just kind of builds up, like Henry Winkler said, that they're termites. It really tears down that relationship if you're not communicating, if you're just assuming what's wrong with the other person, or I
Yeah.
don't know.
Well, I mean, like you were saying, Christopher would come home and be very quiet. And I'm to the point where I understand, okay, yeah, he's been at work for 48 hours. Who knows what he's dealt with or how much sleep he's had or anything like that. So I try to be sensitive to that. But when he's continuously quiet, maybe he's a little short tempered too. Whatever it is, I mean, my brain is going, okay, well, he says he's okay, or he says nothing's the matter. And I'm going, maybe he's upset because I didn't finish the laundry, or there's dirty dishes in the sink, or I said I was going to, pull the weeds, and I didn't get that done. And he had that expectation that was going to get done. And now he's mad. And so you start spiraling when in all reality, if I give him the gentleness to come home and just kind of, I know you don't like the word decompress, but so I'll say a different word, but that's kind of what I mean, to just kind of rest and
Chillax.
kind of chillax, if you will. Yeah. And then it gives him the opportunity to open up more and be a little bit, it's then his responsibility to say, I had a bad shift, or I didn't get any sleep and I'm really tired, to just give me a little bit more than I'm fine, or it's not you. Then it works so much better. And it doesn't have to be, I mean, anything huge. And being in the fire service, there's many times where he came home and didn't want to talk to me about what he saw or what he dealt with. And that's okay. I'm not going to push and require that, but give me a little, like, I had no sleep or something to go on. And so then it's just that little bit of communication that can go a long way, because then in turn, say I can go, oh, you didn't have any sleep, well, I'm going to take the kids and get them out of the house so it can be quiet for you. And
Well,
something like that.
but it hasn't always been something, because sometimes
No,
it's not
no.
just the I didn't sleep or whatever. There's nothing to pinpoint it to. And we've, even without the fire service, without anything like that, there's still, with a with dealing with a mental illness, dealing with anxiety, dealing with depression, something like that. It could be nothing. And I wrote about it in the book that I wrote, that it could be something just ridiculous. It could be something simple, whatever it is. But there's, I'm put into an anxiety attack for no reason, and whatever the situation I'm in, it has nothing to do with anything, or it could just be like out of the blue. There's something that's going on. I'm just in a crappy mood, Well, what's going on? Well, it's nothing. Well, what's bothering you? Well, it's nothing. There's nothing. Nothing happened. Well, obviously something had to have happened because you were in a good mood and now you're in a bad mood. Well, now I'm getting in a worse mood because you keep bothering me, or quote unquote,
Yeah.
you keep asking me about it. Now I'm getting in a worse mood, and I think part of that we have learned is, yeah, I've learned that I just say, I'm just I'm just bummed out for some reason, or I'll just say my anxiety is through the roof. I'm having an anxiety attack, whatever it is, and Molly's able to know that, okay, this is didn't come from anywhere. I'm just in a bummed out mood right now. Nothing happened. It's not anything that she did. It's not anything that could have been prevented. It's just that's what's happening right now. And sometimes it's just I need to be left alone. And that communicating that, like, no, I'm in a crappy mood. I don't want you to ask me about it. I don't want to have any follow-up questions. Just, I just need to get over this funk I'm in, or, yeah, can you just, the kids are being really loud and it's aggravating that. Just something, and it helps alleviate like what Molly and I have experienced has escalated into, something even worse that we could have just nipped it in the bud, so to speak.
Yeah. I mean, it goes both ways too, because it's not just Christopher that, has these. I woke up the other day and I'll be honest, I had a really rotten dream and it put me in a funky mood. And Christopher immediately sensed that and asked me about it. And I didn't really want to talk to him about the dream, but I told him I wasn't mad at him. It's okay. I just had a bad dream and I'm trying to just get out of it. And he was understanding and kind. And I could have just said, no, it's nothing. I don't want to talk. But I was honest, and it sounds silly, right? I had a dream. It wasn't real, but it was enough to just put me, when you have a dream and then you wake up for a little bit and then you fall back asleep and you're back in that awful dream. That's what it was. So I was kind of having a hard time getting out of it. And just communicating, hey, it was a stupid dream. It just kind of bummed me out and I'm working it out right now and it'll be okay. And within an hour, I was fine. And he was kind and receptive and gave me a hug and said he was sorry that I was feeling that way. I just threw my phone on the ground. I apologize.
That's like
I'm
a
sorry.
big noise that's going to happen.
It's a really big noise.
Yeah,
I'm
and,
sorry.
Everybody's going to be distracted by that.
I know. They're not going to be able to get back on task.
Well,
But anyway.
So the therapist, psychiatrist, psychologist, anybody listening to this who wants to chime in, please, I guess not chime in because they can't chime in, but they can leave comments.
Yeah.
Your brain has, I'm going to say, an inability to differentiate between reality and imagination. So on that dream aspect, where Molly knows that it's a dream, she woke up in a bad mood because her brain is telling her that this actually happened. And she knows she's now having to tell her brain that this was not real. So what happens, and we're talking about this communication, because when you don't communicate, what happens is you start making up your own reality in your brain.
Yeah.
You start your brain starts to go haywire. You start to go down a different route and different road, and you're imagining like, okay, you're angry at me because I didn't pull the weeds while you were gone. So that's your reality now, because your imagination has made this reality. So now you're building up these scenarios in your brain that this person is angry at me because of this person's angry at me because of that. That is now reality. So if I allow Molly to get to that point where she's making realities her own realities in her head because I failed to communicate that I'm just in a crappy mood. Now her brain is making a reality where I am now upset with her because she didn't pull the weeds. And that's going to spiral. It's going to escalate because now her, even if I tell her, no, I'm not upset with you because you didn't pull the weeds. I didn't even notice that. Well, her brain has already made that reality. And because we're human, our brains can't really change that unless we convince ourselves otherwise. And it takes quite a bit to do that.
Yeah. I just, I don't know. I mean, it's really interesting what you're saying, and it's very, very true. And I think in our own relationship, we've been in those dark times where we've both been extremely guilty of not communicating and filling in the blanks, if you will. And it doesn't go well, you know. It doesn't go well at all. And it's not just, like I said before, it doesn't just communication isn't so important, or isn't just so important in your family unit, with your spouse or with your children. I just got back from a work meeting, and it was hours of communication and trying to, differentiate what the other person is meaning and what they're saying. And we're trying to communicate and get these things figured out, and people have different ways of communicating. But when you open up and you're honest and real, and you just kind of say the things that need to be said, man, things go so much smoother and so much easier. And when you can get that acknowledgement that somebody's heard you, and maybe they repeat back exactly what you said or whatever it is. I know that kind of drives you nuts, Christopher. But
It does.
but I'm just saying, when it's sometimes that confirmation that, hey, you heard me and you understood me because you repeated it back. And I've had to do that with you before, even though I know it's not your favorite, because sometimes you say something and maybe I can't quite understand what you mean, so I have to get it out in my own way. So that way we know, okay, we are communicating and meeting in the middle, and we understand what each other is saying.
Well, I like to communicate with analogies. So
He does. And most
well,
of them are good.
host.
Some of them have been not good at all.
So Tony Robbins says to effectively communicate, we must realize that we are all different in the way we perceive the world and use the understanding as a guide to our communication with others. So like Molly said, we communicate differently, but we can't assume that the other person's going to communicate the same way that we do, and that they're going to perceive our communications the same way. So as much as it drives me nuts by, that parroting, like, okay, so what you're telling me is, like, it is a way for us to communicate and make sure that we're on the same page, because we don't communicate the same.
Yeah. Well, and it also, I mean, just because you think you're communicating with somebody, I have a friend who just recently, I was telling Christopher a story about, that is wonderful and kind and sweet and amazing and all the great things. But if this friend isn't fully focused, looking in my eyes, I know that no matter what I feel that I am communicating to them, they are not receiving it at all. So I have to be intentional and make sure that when I need to say something important to them, that they're looking at me and they actually hear me, because I think I'm doing my job and communicating what needs to be said, but they're not receiving it. And so I think that's a big part of communication too. And Christopher and I have experienced this, where he says, I told you this, and I'm going, no, you didn't. You didn't tell me at all. Well, he very well may have said something to me, but it could have been when I was in the kitchen cooking and the music was playing, or the kids were asking me questions. And so he's thinking that he talked to me and I heard it, and I have no clue at all. So it's that being not just saying it, but having that active listening part as well from the other person.
Well, and on that note, like, just put your phone down when you're communicating with somebody. If somebody's talking to you, and I know that's one of my pet peeves is when I'm trying to tell a story and somebody's, on their phone. And like Molly said, it's like, are you actually listening to what I'm saying, or are you just clicking away and then waiting for your turn to speak? So,
Yeah. And I think that's one thing that, once again, we're both guilty of and that we've learned. And there have been times, because of the nature of my job, Christopher will be in the middle of a story or telling me something, and I'll get a text or an email that is timely and I need to respond to. But if I can look at him and say, I'm listening to you, but I need to respond to this real quick. And just that communication that he knows, hey, I'm not blocking him out. I'm not ignoring him. I'm hearing what he has to say. I just have to pause for a moment, and then I'm coming right back to being an active listener.
well, and on the kind of the opposite perspective is where if you're sitting there and you're on your phone typing something, I've kind of learned that, well, it's an email or a text message or something that needs to be done, because normally I think what a lot of people like to do is when somebody's coming in and somebody's in the middle of doing something, you want to just walk in and just start talking to them and interrupting what they're doing. And part of that is we think, oh, you're on your phone, so you're not doing anything. You're not doing anything.
You're goofing around.
Yeah, you're goofing around. Let me tell you my story. But it's kind of that recognition of what is this person doing? Is this person in the middle of something that I can wait for my story or my question or whatever it is. So I've kind of learned to do that too, where I'll walk up into the room and kind of see, okay, Molly's doing this. I'm going to stand there and just kind of creep over her shoulder while she's finishing up doing what she's doing. I'm kidding. It drives me nuts when people do that, to just like walk in and just stand hovering over me.
That
while
was
I finish
Christopher
up
being sarcastic.
Yes.
Yeah.
People don't normally follow my sarcasm. They correct me when I'm being sarcastic,
That's
so
why
we
I'm
did
telling
have to.
you.
I know.
That's good.
Yeah. No, I got it. I'm just clarifying for the listening audience. So, I don't know. That's kind of my thoughts and I guess kind of what we've recognized over our
20 years next month.
I was going to say, almost 20 years together.
We should do something fun.
Yeah. I'm not disagreeing. I'm just, yeah. Anyway, the things that we have learned, and a lot of it is it's struggling because, when I'm dealing with something that I was trying to keep hidden, even though she knew, Molly knew that I suffered with, with this and that, but I tried to keep that extent hidden. I didn't want to say, like, I'm just in a crappy mood right now because, like, this is how I've been. I've lived my entire life with it. And I know that this is just a depressive a moment. Like, I know for me that it's going to last probably the rest of the day. But I didn't want to tell her that, like, this is my depression coming out. This is my anxiety coming out. I didn't want to say that. I wanted to keep it hidden. So what happened is we just kind of went down this crappy road of not communicating because I was trying to keep hidden something that I didn't want her to see the full extent of. And then I just kind of allowed that to spiral, and our communication sucked for a long time, I think.
Oh yeah.
My
No, I think you're absolutely right. And like it saddens me because I think back to how many times that we talked and I pleaded and begged with you to open up and to be honest with me. And I think it was just such a fight, an internal fight for you to have that image of being being put together and being strong and knowing that it's okay to show that. And I don't know. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I am going to ask. I feel that ever since that we've both, been better at communicating and you've opened up more, it seems to me like when you do have a hard time, it doesn't last as long and you're able to work through things.
Right. Because I'm not allowing that to spiral. I mean, it definitely helps by just saying like I'm in a bad mood, because it doesn't compound from there. It doesn't keep going back and forth. So it definitely doesn't last as long. Like I've just been kind of, I don't know, not in a great mood today. I don't know, just discouraged about some stuff. And but by being able to say that and communicate that, it doesn't, it our communication doesn't exacerbate the problem.
Yeah.
So, or lack thereof.
Yeah. It's just, I mean, the lack of communication is just a killer. What was it? What was the quote? It's a termite.
Yes.
That, yeah. And
No, that's assumptions.
Oh, assumption. Well, still, I would add that the lack of communication is that in that as well. And I mean,
Well, because without communication, all you're left with is assumptions.
yeah, absolutely. And it drives me nuts. I'm pretty vocal and open and
I am not.
Try to face things head on. And if I have a problem with somebody, I want to talk about it, or if I have a question or anything. And I don't know, in my world, communication is very, very important. And I think that we've gained a lot and we've just learned a lot over our 20 years. And just, I'm not saying we're perfect in any way, shape, or form.
I'm gonna reiterate that.
Yeah, like definitely, we still have times where we can't seem to get on the same page communicating, but we're trying and we're getting there. But yeah, just I don't know, opening up and being more honest with each other and with our kids and everybody else too. I think it's super important.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're gonna kind of wrap up with that, and
We could probably talk a lot longer.
I know,
but we
could communicate for a longer time.
We could communicate.
I don't know. Any final words?
No, I hope people think we're sometimes as funny as we think we are. But
It's all in the eye of the beholder, right? So, okay. Thanks for listening. As always, you can go to thefightwithdepression.com and check us out. You can go to the podcast page. If you are on Spotify, then you can go and give us some feedback on there. We have, questions and polls and everything. So go, and don't forget, if you are not already subscribed to the channel, go ahead and subscribe. That way you get updates whenever we put out new episodes and everything like that. So, once again, thanks for listening. And until next time, God bless.